I love coasting financial independence, almost as much as I love the idea of being truly financial independent. And today we're going to be exploring 4 reasons for loving this part of the financial journey so much. Let's get started. But before we get going, be sure to like this video if you haven't already, as it really does help out the channel a lot, and subscribe with notifications on for more money-related videos like this one every single week. And if you want to further support this channel, you can check out some of the links I've left in the description below, which includes a link to the investing platform M1 Finance. Get started investing for free today. But before we get into why exactly I love coasting financial independence so much, let's first take a moment to talk about what it is exactly, and how it differs from traditional retirement savings plans. Coasting financial independence is a fairly simple thing to understand, even if there isn't a widely applicable rule of thumb to help you know once you've achieved it. The basic idea is that at some point on your journey to true financial independence, you will have saved and invested enough money that you could simply stop putting money away every month and still be able to become fully financially independent and retire at the age you're aiming for. So while there isn't a widely applicable rule of thumb like the 4% rule for coasting financial independence, there are 4 variables you can use to figure out when you'll be able to achieve it. Those variables are the lifestyle you want to have in retirement, the rate of return you will earn on your investments between now and retirement, the age at which you start investing for retirement, and of course the age when you want to become fully financially independent. So let's take a look at an example to see how we can calculate coasting financial independence using these 4 variables. Let's say that John and Jane are 25 years old. They take home $60,000 a year and live on $30,000 a year, investing the rest for retirement. Let's assume that John and Jane's investments earn about 7% per year after adjusting for expenses and inflation, which is right around what Vanguard's S&P 500 index fund has done since 1980, assuming you reinvested your dividends. Let's also assume that they want to maintain their $30,000 a year lifestyle in retirement, and they wish to retire at the age of 55. Based on these assumptions, John and Jane will require a nest egg of about $750,000 to be considered fully financially independent at the age of 55. Since they're capable of beginning to invest immediately, they have 30 years to amass that nest egg. If they manage to invest that $2,500 a month over the course of just 45 months, or 3 years and 9 months, and average that 7% return after inflation, they would have about $122,600 in their nest egg a few months before turning 29. And if they stopped investing completely at that point, their nest egg would still grow to be about $759,000 by the time they're 55 and ready to hang up their boots for good. That's pretty darn good if you ask me, considering they maintain their entire standard of living adjusted for inflation in retirement, while retiring a full 12 years earlier than the standard age. And to achieve that, they didn't even have to spend as much time saving as the average student spends in college getting a degree. And mind you, this was all done without any assistance from employer matches, bonuses, pay raises, or the like. But perhaps the nicest thing about coasting financial independence is that it gets even better for those who don't mind working at something, even if it isn't the job you currently have, until the standard retirement age. Hypothetically, if John and Jane had worked, at least to some degree, until the age of 67, they would have been able to start coasting their way into financial independence after just 19 months of investing. That's barely a year and a half of investing, and a total of just $47,500 of their own money, and their future is basically set, at least assuming they manage to earn 7% per year after inflation. Which brings me to the first reason I love coasting financial independence. It's often a much more efficient use of money than the standard plans. Compare our results to what the standard retirement savings plan would look like for John and Jane. The standard advice is to save anywhere from 10 to 15% of your income for retirement. If John and Jane saved 10% of their income and wanted to retire at the age of 67 with a $30,000 a year income, they would be able to start coasting after approximately 121 months of investing, or about 10 years. If they bumped it up to 15%, they could start coasting after just 71 months, or just under 6 years. Neither of those time periods are bad by any stretch of the imagination, but both are quite a bit longer than the 19 months John and Jane had to invest when they were saving aggressively. They also both end up taking more of John and Jane's own money to achieve the same goal of future financial independence. For example, with the 10% savings plan, John and Jane are required to save $60,500 of their own money. And the 15% savings plan is a little better, but still requires John and Jane to put away $53,250 of their own money. A second reason that I love coasting financial independence is that it gives you greater financial flexibility to weather any unfortunate realities you may experience in the future, as well as to pursue other financial goals or just live everyday life. For example, we assumed a rate of return of 7% per year after expenses and inflation. Vanguard's S&P 500 index fund has averaged about 7.4% per year since 1980 at the time of this writing. But that doesn't mean it'll continue to do that in the future. What would the numbers have looked like if John and Jane's future reality was less fortunate, and they only averaged 5% per year after inflation and expenses? Well, if John and Jane were pursuing coasting financial independence, and saving $30,000 a year so that they could retire at age 67 with a $30,000 a year income, they would be able to start coasting their way into financial independence after 42 months of investing, or about 3.5 years. That is quite a bit longer than the 19 months we saw before, but it's got nothing on the time periods using the more traditional retirement savings plans. Because, say using the 15% savings plan, John and Jane would have to invest for 182 months before they could start coasting. That's over 15 years. And assuming they use the 10% rule of thumb, that time frame would jump all the way up to 378 months, or 31.5 years. In total, John and Jane invest $105,000 of their own money under the aggressive savings plan, $136,500 with a 15% savings rate, and $189,000 with a 10% savings rate. Even if we ignore the value that comes from being able to put a larger portion of your income towards other things in life, that $84,000 difference between the aggressive saving coasting financial independence plan and the 10% traditional retirement savings plan is a fairly decent down payment in many places around the country, or a very significant portion of a college degree for your kids or grandkids, or an absolutely stunning vacation fund. Take your pick. What's even cooler is that if John and Jane decided that they wanted to raise their standard of living in retirement, say to the full $60,000 a year that they earn, they'd be able to do it if they had started with the higher savings rate from the beginning. Under the same assumptions that we just used, John and Jane could begin coasting their way into a $60,000 a year retirement with just 93 months, or 7 years and 9 months, worth of investing. However, at least under these assumptions, such a lifestyle wouldn't even be achievable by age 67 with a consistent 10% or 15% savings rate. John and Jane could further secure their financial future by paying off their home early. Say they have a 30-year, $240,000 mortgage with a 4% interest rate at the time they began saving. They took 7 years and 9 months to save for retirement under the aggressive plan and can now turn their full focus to paying off the rest of their mortgage, which at this point would have a balance of a little over $202,000. Assuming the same income and expense figures as before, this could lead John and Jane to having a fully paid-for home in about 5 years. Since their mortgage payment was about $1,150 a month, they would now be capable of living on a mere $1,350 a month, assuming none of their other expenses had changed over the time at least. Either that or their $60,000 a year income in retirement would just end up going up a lot further than it would have before. Even if none of those things applied to John and Jane, they'd still have anywhere from an extra $500 to $750 a month to throw around for everyday stuff once their future was taken care of. And I don't know about you, but I think an extra $500 a month could be quite a lot when none of it has to go towards paying off debts, saving, or investing for the future, unless we want it to. A third reason I love coasting financial independence is that it will almost always lead to gaining greater levels of financial adaptability than you would have gained had you followed traditional retirement strategies. This one is fairly straightforward, but can have far-reaching consequences when life happens. I mean, think about it. In John and Jane's case, they had to figure out a sustainable way to save 50% of their income in order to reach coasting financial independence early in life. That knowledge and experience will not only serve them well when it comes to the portion of their lives where they need to save the money for their future, but also for any time in their future when money may seem tight. If they decide to have kids, they already know how to research ways to fit that into their budget in a sustainable way. If one of them has a medical emergency, they know how they can temporarily tighten their financial belts and dig their way back above ground. And they know how to do these things without making their lives totally miserable, because they've almost certainly taken some time to figure out what things are worth spending money on and what things aren't. Regardless of your level of income, it's almost impossible to reach this level of financial independence without having at least some restraint. A fourth reason I love coasting financial independence is that it can bring a greater sense of freedom and security than traditional retirement strategies. This can make it easier for some people who pursue it to make what would otherwise be incredibly difficult decisions regarding their lifestyle or careers. We've already talked about changes to lifestyle, so let's talk about the career part, which can be just as relevant. According to the statistics, there are a fairly sizable number of people who either don't like their job or just have other things in mind that they would want to do every day, even if it may not pay as well. When it comes to coasting financial independence, it doesn't really matter whether you absolutely despise your job or you don't mind your job but would rather switch to another job that you think would be more fulfilling but doesn't pay as well. Either way, the fact of the matter is, if money were no object, you probably wouldn't continue working at your current job. Or at least you wouldn't continue working at that job in the amount of hours that you are now. And if sacrificing a couple luxuries here and there for a few years, or taking advantage of some savings hacks like we've discussed in previous videos would be worth it to enable you to switch your career, or go part-time, or whatever the case may be, coasting financial independence could be an idea worth considering. But that'll do it for me today. Once again, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to smash that like button if you haven't already, subscribe, and hit that bell next to my name so you'll be notified of all my future uploads. I generally upload every single Monday, and if you have a friend that would be interested in this kind of content, be sure to share it with them. Let's really get this information out there and start our own financial revolution.